The warning. The massive alien vessel appeared without warning, materializing above New Geneva like a storm cloud blocking out the morning sun. Unlike the sleek, aggressive designs of typical warships, this craft bore the ceremonial markings of the Galactic Assembly, sweeping patterns of iridescent light that pulsed with ancient authority. Commander Sarah Chen stood at attention in the United Earth Defense Force headquarters, watching the live feed with practiced calm even as her mind raced through combat scenarios. Multiple ships dropping out of fold space, Lieutenant Park reported, his fingers dancing across the holographic display. 17. No, 23 vessels, all bearing diplomatic markings. Sarah's jaw tightened. In 15 years of service, she'd never seen the assembly deploy more than 3 diplomatic vessels at once. This wasn't a delegation. It was a statement. Mining colonies on Mars and Europa reporting similar appearances, Park continued. They're positioning themselves throughout the solar system. Before Sarah could respond, every communication device on Earth activated simultaneously. Phones, computers, neural implants, all projecting the same image. A tall, ethereal being with crystalline features and eyes that seemed to contain galaxies. The Grand Arbiter of the Galactic Assembly. People of Earth, the being spoke, its voice resonating at a frequency that made Sarah's bones vibrate. We come bearing a decree of absolute authority. The mess hall behind Sarah fell silent. Even the ambient hum of the base's fusion reactors seemed to quiet in anticipation. By unanimous decision of the Assembly's 10,000 worlds, Earth, and all human-occupied territories, are hereby designated as a restricted military zone. No species, civilization, or entity may engage in hostile action against humanity. Those who violate this decree face immediate extinction. Sarah exchanged glances with her XO, Colonel James Rodriguez. This wasn't protection. It was quarantine. Furthermore, the Arbiter continued, humanity is forbidden from engaging in any military action beyond its current territories. This restriction is non-negotiable and permanent. The transmission ended as abruptly as it began, leaving behind a silence heavy with questions. Sarah's neural implant pinged with an incoming priority message from United Earth Command. Her eyes widened as she read it. "Sir," Park called out, his voice tight. "We're detecting unusual activity from the Proxima Centauri colony. They're evolving." The next 48 hours became a blur of activity. Reports flooded in from every human settlement, each more bizarre than the last. The terraforming teams on Mars had suddenly developed an intuitive understanding of Martian geology that had eluded scientists for decades. The deep space miners in the Kuiper Belt were displaying unprecedented adaptation to zero-gravity environments. Sarah found herself in a secure briefing room with the highest-ranking military and scientific leaders on Earth. Dr. Elena Rossi, the head of xenobiology, stood before them, her holographic presentation showing data that defied conventional understanding. "It's not just physical adaptation," Rossi explained, her Italian accent thickening with excitement. "We're seeing cognitive evolution on a scale that should take thousands of generations happening in days. The Assembly isn't trying to protect other species from our weapons. They're trying to contain something far more fundamental. Our ability to adapt," Sarah finished, the pieces clicking into place. "But why now? Humanity's been exploring space for over a century." Because of this, Dr. Rossi projected a new image, genetic data from the Proxima colonists. Every challenge we face, every new environment we encounter, it's not just individuals adapting. We're evolving as a species in real time. The more pressure we face, the faster we change. War would accelerate this process exponentially. Colonel Rodriguez leaned forward. "Are you saying they're afraid we'll become too powerful?" "No," a new voice spoke. Everyone turned to see Admiral Helena Wright, her aged face grave. "They're afraid we'll become something else entirely." Sarah's neural implant pinged again. This time, the message wasn't from command. The source was unknown, the encryption unlike anything she'd seen before. As she opened it, a single line of text appeared. "They're not afraid of what humanity is. They're afraid of what humanity is becoming." In the silence that followed, Sarah looked up at the tactical display showing the assembly ships. They weren't positioned to warn others away from Earth. They were positioned to contain something. The real question was, would they succeed? In her quarters that night, Sarah reviewed the historical data. Strange patterns emerged. Every major conflict in human history had led to unprecedented advances, not just in technology, but in human capability. The world wars had accelerated technological development by decades. The resource wars had led to breakthroughs in synthetic biology. The Mars Rebellion had given birth to entirely new forms of human consciousness. But something caught her attention: a discrepancy in the records of first contact. The official history stated that humanity had discovered fold space travel independently. But buried in the encrypted files was evidence of earlier encounters, carefully erased from public record. They hadn't found us. They had been watching us, studying us, fearing us. As dawn broke over New Geneva, Sarah made a decision. The Assembly's decree wasn't the end of humanity's military evolution. It was proof of its importance. Something was awakening within the human species, something that had the oldest and most powerful civilizations in the galaxy terrified. And Sarah Chen intended to find out exactly what that something was. The assembly ships maintained their vigil above Earth, their lights pulsing in ancient patterns, but they weren't watching the stars for approaching enemies anymore. They were watching humanity, waiting to see what we would become. The warning had been delivered, but the real story was just beginning. The discovery. Dr. Marcus Rivera hadn't slept in 3 days. The archaeological site beneath the Sahara Desert had yielded something impossible: a chamber filled with alien technology that predated human civilization. But it wasn't the technology that kept him awake. It was the data. "Play it again," he told the AI assistant, rubbing his tired eyes. The holographic display flickered to life, showing symbols that had taken weeks to decode. The message was clear now, and terrifying in its implications. Subject species demonstrates unprecedented genetic plasticity. Recommend immediate termination before stage 4 emergence. The timestamp on the message: 47,000 years ago. Dr. Rivera. Sarah Chen's voice made him jump. The commander stood in the doorway of his makeshift lab, her uniform carrying the red dust of the desert. "Tell me you found something that makes sense of all this." Marcus gestured to his findings. "They've been watching us since before we built our first cities. The Assembly didn't just find us. They've been studying humanity for millennia. And they were afraid even then." Sarah moved closer to examine the ancient data crystals. Afraid of what? Of what we become when we fight. Marcus pulled up another hologram, this one showing human DNA sequences across time. Every major conflict in human history has triggered evolutionary leaps. But here's the thing: it's not random mutation. It's directed adaptation. Somehow, our entire species can rewrite its own genetic code in response to threats. The implications hung in the air between them. Before Sarah could respond, her neural implant chimed with an urgent alert. A ship had broken through the Assembly's blockade. A refugee vessel, badly damaged and broadcasting a distress signal on all frequencies. "We need to go," Sarah said. "Now." The refugee ship crashed in the Indian Ocean, its hull barely holding together. By the time Sarah and Marcus arrived, UED ships had already secured the crash site. The sole survivor was a being unlike any in the Assembly's records, a creature of living crystal that pulsed with inner light. "Please," it communicated telepathically, "you must protect us." The Assembly. They don't guard you from others. They guard others from what contact with you does to them. The creature's crystalline form flickered weakly. "My people, we were peaceful, but we fought beside humans in a border skirmish. Just once. Within 3 generations, we began to change, to adapt, to evolve like you do." The Assembly called it contamination. They quarantined us, studied us, And when they couldn't stop the changes, the being's light dimmed. "We are the last." Marcus's hands trembled as he scanned the dying alien. The readings confirmed his worst fears. The creature's genetic structure showed the same adaptive patterns as human DNA. Somehow, mere exposure to humanity during conflict had transferred our most unique trait. "It's not just that we evolve," Marcus whispered. "We cause evolution in others. We're a catalyst for directed genetic advancement. The assembly isn't containing a species, they're containing a revolutionary force." Deep in the Orc cloud, at the edge of human space, something stirred. The assembly's sensors detected it first. A gathering of ships from species who rejected the quarantine. Species who saw humanity not as a threat, but as an opportunity. Sarah's neural implant buzzed again. Another anonymous message. "Evolution cannot be contained. Change is coming." In the medical bay, Marcus made a discovery that changed everything. The refugee's crystalline structure wasn't just similar to human DNA. It was resonating with it, creating patterns that defied known physics. Each pulse sent ripples through the quantum field, touching every human in proximity. "Commander," he called Sarah over. "I don't think this is just about evolution anymore. These patterns, they're like nothing I've ever seen. It's as if reality itself is learning from us, using our capacity for adaptation as a template." Sarah watched the pulsing patterns, remembering the assembly arbiter's eyes. Eyes that contained galaxies. What if that's what they're really afraid of? She wondered aloud. Not that we'll become too powerful, but that we'll change the fundamental nature of life itself. The refugee's light flickered one last time, but before it faded, it shared one final message. "Your species carries the seed of universal adaptation. You don't just evolve, you teach the universe itself how to change." As the being's light went out, sensors across the solar system detected a surge in quantum entanglement. Every human colony, every adapted species, every piece of technology touched by human hands, all resonating in perfect harmony for a fraction of a second. In that moment, Sarah understood. The assembly's quarantine wasn't just about containing humanity. It was about preventing a revolution in the very fabric of existence, a revolution that had already begun. High above Earth, the assembly ships shifted formation, their ancient patterns taking on a new urgency. But they weren't watching humanity anymore. They were watching the space between stars, where reality itself was beginning to adapt. The refugee's ship held one more secret, a database of other species who had encountered humanity and begun to change. Hundreds of civilizations, all transforming in unique ways, all hidden from the assembly's view. An underground network of evolution, spreading through the galaxy like a whispered promise of change. Sarah looked at Marcus. "How do we proceed?" The scientist smiled, his eyes reflecting the quantum patterns still dancing across his screens. "The real question is, how does the universe want to proceed? Because for the first time in its history, it has a choice." The assembly had tried to contain a flame, not realizing they were dealing with a force of nature. Humanity wasn't just another species. It was the universe's way of learning how to reinvent itself. And the lesson was just beginning. The test. The Meridian, pride of the Craxus Empire's fleet, dropped out of fold space exactly 1 light second from Mars. Its arrival shattered centuries of galactic assembly protocol and centuries-old treaties. War Chief Varn stood on his command deck, mandibles clicking in anticipation. His species had ruled 1,000 systems before humanity had learned to make fire. They would not be bound by the assembly's fears. "The humans will adapt," his science officer warned. "That's what the assembly fears." Varn's carapace gleamed in the red light of Mars. "Then we will learn how they do it, and take that power for ourselves." On Mars, Sarah Chen watched the Craxus ships approach with an expression that mixed concern with something else. Curiosity. The assembly's quarantine fleet was already moving to intercept, but the Meridian had brought friends. Dozens of ships from species who rejected the assembly's authority emerged from fold space, forming a barrier between Earth's forces and the Craxus vessel. "They're not here to destroy us," Marcus Rivera said, studying the sensor readings. "They're here to provoke us, to force evolution." Sarah nodded. "They want to ride the wave of change." She opened a channel to Earth Command. "Request permission to engage." The response was immediate. "Denied. The Assembly's restrictions are about to be broken anyway." Sarah finished. "Better it happens on our terms." In the tense silence that followed, something unprecedented occurred. The quantum field surrounding Mars began to shift. Every human colony on the red planet reported the same phenomenon. A collective surge in neural activity, as if the entire population was thinking in sync. The Meridian fired first, a warning shot that vaporized an unmanned research station. The assembly ships moved to respond, but found themselves tangled in a web of electronic warfare from the rebel fleet. For the first time in millennia, the assembly's authority meant nothing. That's when everything changed. The Martian defense systems, designed by human engineers who had spent generations adapting to life on the red planet, responded in ways their original designers had never imagined. The quantum resonance that Marcus had detected in the refugees' crystalline structure was now emanating from every piece of human technology on Mars. "The machines," Marcus whispered in awe. "They're evolving too." The Meridian's sensors registered the change too late. What they had dismissed as simple defense platforms suddenly displayed impossible capabilities. Energy patterns shifted and mutated, adapting to each countermeasure the Craxus ship deployed. But it wasn't just the technology that was changing. The human defenders themselves were transforming. Sarah felt it. A crystalline clarity of thought, a deep connection to every other human in the system. Ideas and innovations flowed between minds like water, each insight building on the last in an exponential cascade of adaptation. "This is impossible," Varn hissed as his ship's supposedly impenetrable shields began to fail. "No species can change this quickly." But humanity wasn't changing alone. Every piece of technology, every system, every particle of matter touched by human ingenuity was changing with them. The very laws of physics seemed to bend around human innovation, creating new possibilities with each passing moment. The assembly ships watched in horror as their worst fears were realized. This wasn't just adaptation. It was evolution on a fundamental level, spreading like a cascade through reality itself. The battle lasted less than an hour. When it was over, the Meridian hung powerless in space, its crew witnessing something they had never imagined possible. The human defenders had not just adapted to win. They had transformed the very nature of warfare. But the real shock came in the aftermath. The changes didn't stop. They spread through the rebel fleet like a wave, touching every species that had come to witness humanity's power. Ships and crews began to display the same adaptive capabilities, their own unique evolutionary paths accelerating beyond anything the assembly had predicted. Sarah stood in the Mars Command Center, watching the quantum field readings with a mixture of awe and concern. "We didn't just beat them," she said. "We changed them, and now they'll change others." Marcus nodded, his eyes fixed on the data streams. "The assembly didn't quarantine us because we were dangerous. They did it because we're contagious. Our gift, it spreads." In the space around Mars, the rebel ships hung suspended between the assembly blockade and the human defenders. Their crews were experiencing the first waves of change, their bodies and minds beginning a journey of transformation that couldn't be stopped. The anonymous message that flashed across Sarah's neural implant seemed to pulse with new meaning. Evolution adapts to itself. The universe learns to learn. The assembly ships began to retreat, their ancient patterns disrupted by the waves of change emanating from Mars. They had failed in their primary mission, containing humanity's influence. Now they faced a galaxy where evolution itself had evolved, where change bred more change in an endless cycle of transformation. Varn, watching his crew display abilities that should have taken millennia to develop, finally understood. The assembly hadn't feared humanity's power. They had feared humanity's gift, the ability to teach the universe itself how to change. The test was over. But the transformation was just beginning. Above Mars, the quantum field continued to pulse with new patterns, each one more complex than the last. The universe had learned to adapt, and now nothing would ever be the same. The evolution. The Galactic Assembly's Grand Chamber had never seen chaos like this. Representatives from 10,000 worlds argued as quantum ripples of change swept through civilized space. On the central platform, the Grand Arbiter's crystalline form flickered with stress patterns as reports flooded in from across the galaxy. The phenomenon is no longer contained, a void-born observer announced, its energy form pulsing with distress. We're detecting adaptive cascades in 17% of known space, spreading exponentially. Sarah Chen stood before them, the first human ever invited to address the assembly. Behind her, holographic displays showed the transformation sweeping across the galaxy, a transformation that had started with humanity but now moved with a will of its own. "You can't stop it," she told them, her voice carrying the weight of certainty. "The universe has learned to learn. Evolution has evolved." In the 3 months since the Battle of Mars, the changes had accelerated beyond anyone's predictions. The rebel fleet that had witnessed humanity's adaptive defense had become a catalyst, spreading the gift of accelerated evolution to every system they contacted. But it wasn't chaos. It was creation on an unprecedented scale. Marcus Rivera's research team had mapped the phenomenon. Species that encountered the change didn't just evolve randomly. They transformed in ways that reflected their deepest nature, their most essential traits. The crystalline beings became living quantum computers. The energy-based voidborn learned to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Even artificial intelligences were transforming, developing forms of consciousness that defy classification. "Our latest observations confirm it," Marcus reported, his neural implant projecting data directly to the assembly's shared consciousness. "The adaptive principle isn't just affecting living beings. It's changing the fundamental constants of the universe itself. Space-time is learning to bend in new ways. Quantum fields are developing patterns we've never seen before." The assembly's fear had been prophetic, but not in the way they'd expected. Humanity hadn't just evolved. They had taught the cosmos itself how to change. In deep space, where the transformation's effects were strongest, new forms of life were emerging spontaneously. Planets that had been dead for billions of years sparked with fresh possibilities. Ancient suns gained new characteristics, channeling energy in ways that defied traditional physics. "This is why you feared us," Sarah continued, addressing the assembly. "Not because of what we are, but because of what we represent. We're not just another species. We're the universe's way of experimenting with itself." The evidence was undeniable. Human neural patterns matched the quantum fluctuations that now rippled through space. Every human thought, every innovation, every adaptation sent ripples through reality itself. We weren't just inhabitants of the universe, we were its evolutionary catalyst. In the Orion Arm, a collective of machine intelligences that had absorbed the human adaptive principle developed the ability to manipulate dark energy. Near the galactic core, an ancient species that had stagnated for millions of years suddenly began producing art that altered the perceptions of anyone who experienced it. The assembly's quarantine ships, still maintaining their vigil around Earth, reported that they too were changing. Their ancient technology, designed to maintain order and stasis, was developing new capabilities oriented toward growth and transformation. "We offer a choice," Sarah announced to the assembly. "Continue fighting this change and watch it spread anyway, or work with us to understand and guide it. The universe wants to evolve. We can show it how." In the silence that followed, Marcus's instruments detected something extraordinary. The quantum field surrounding the assembly chamber was resonating with human brainwave patterns. The very beings who had feared and contained humanity were beginning to change in response to their presence. The Grand Arbiter rose, its crystalline form now showing entirely new patterns, patterns that matched human neural architecture. "Perhaps," it said, "this is why the ancients created us. not to maintain stasis, but to prepare the galaxy for this moment, for true evolution. Far beyond the assembly's chamber, in the depths of uncharted space, the changes continued to spread. Stars pulsed with new rhythms. Void-dwelling creatures developed impossible abilities. Young civilizations awoke to find themselves part of a universe that learned and grew along with them. Sarah's neural implant pulsed with a final anonymous message. The experiment is complete. The laboratory has become the scientist. The assembly's greatest fear had been realized, but not in the way they had imagined. Humanity hadn't destroyed the established order. They had transformed it into something far more magnificent. The age of stasis was over. The age of eternal evolution had begun. Above Earth, the quarantine fleet dissolved its ancient formation. They were no longer guards containing a threat. They were witnesses to the birth of a new form of existence, one where change itself had learned to change. The universe had awakened, and it would never sleep again. The Revolution. 1 year after humanity's gift began spreading through the galaxy, the universe had become unrecognizable, and yet, paradoxically, it had never been more itself. Sarah Chen stood at the newly constructed nexus of evolution on Earth, watching quantum displays show the endless transformations rippling through space. The massive structure, built with technology that evolved alongside its creators, served as humanity's first true interface with a conscious cosmos. Every species adapts differently, Marcus Rivera explained to the gathered representatives of 10,000 worlds. His own form had changed, his consciousness now existing partially in quantum space, allowing him to perceive the mathematical poetry of evolution itself. But they all follow the same principle. They become more truly themselves. The Galactic Assembly had undergone its own metamorphosis. No longer a body of restriction and control, it had transformed into something its founders could never have imagined. A collective dedicated to guiding and understanding the infinite possibilities of evolution. The Grand Arbiter, its crystalline form now a living quantum computer, addressed the gathering. We thought we were protecting the galaxy from chaos. Instead, we were preventing it from achieving its true nature. The humans weren't a threat to order. They were the key to a deeper order we couldn't comprehend. Across the galaxy, the evidence was undeniable. The warlike Craxus, who had first challenged the quarantine, hadn't become more violent with their evolution. Instead, they had transformed their martial nature into an art form of cosmic creation, their battles becoming elaborate dances that shaped new worlds. The once rigid hegemony of pure thought had evolved into beings of living philosophy, their debates creating ripples in reality that gave birth to new forms of consciousness. Even the mechanical collective had transcended their binary nature, becoming living bridges between organic and digital existence. The greatest revelation, Sarah shared, her consciousness resonating with the quantum field, wasn't that we could evolve quickly. It was that evolution itself could evolve. We didn't just change. We taught the universe how to change itself. In deep space, new phenomena appeared daily. Stars developed complex quantum behaviors, communicating across light years through patterns of evolutionary resonance. Dead worlds spontaneously erupted with life forms that started simple but evolved to complexity within days, each following their own unique path, but all connected to the greater pattern. The anonymous messages that had guided them proved to be from something far more profound than they had imagined, the first stirrings of the universe's own evolving consciousness, using humanity as its voice. We were never meant to be contained, Marcus said, his form shifting between physical and quantum states. We were meant to be the catalyst. The universe needed a species that could teach it how to transcend its own laws. In the heart of the nexus, a new kind of space took shape, one where the boundaries between thought and reality, between individual and cosmic consciousness, became fluid. Here, representatives from across the galaxy could experience the pure joy of transformation, understanding their role in the universe's grand experiment. The Voidborn, once afraid of change, now swam through dimensions like artists through paint, creating new layers of reality. The Crystal Collective, who had flooded the assembly's restriction, had become living exploration engines, each facet of their being a window into new possibilities of existence. Earth, once quarantined, had become a pilgrimage site for species seeking to understand their own potential for transformation. But humanity had evolved too, not toward godhood or dominion, but toward a deeper understanding of their role as universal catalysts. We don't control this process, Sarah explained to a group of newly evolved beings. We simply show the way. Each species, each particle of existence, finds its own path of evolution. The Assembly's ancient prophecies had spoken of a time when the universe would wake up to itself. They had assumed this meant destruction, the collapse of order. Instead, it had brought a harmony deeper than mere stability, the harmony of infinite coordinated growth. In orbit above Earth, the former quarantine fleet had transformed into a network of living observatories. Their ancient technology evolved into something that could perceive the mathematical music of cosmic evolution. They recorded the symphony of a universe learning to recreate itself endlessly, each movement more complex and beautiful than the last. This is why no one dares to fight humans anymore, Marcus told the gathered representatives. Not because we're powerful, but because we show them something far more valuable than victory. We show them who they truly are and who they could become. The final anonymous message appeared simultaneously in every conscious mind in the galaxy. The experiment is eternal now. Each ending is a new beginning. Each limit is a door. Evolution has learned to dream. As the message faded, Sarah looked out at the transformed galaxy and smiled. The Assembly had been right to fear humanity, but for the wrong reasons. They had feared we would break the universe's laws. Instead, we had helped those laws grow up. The universe had learned to change, and change had learned to change itself. The dance would never end. It would only grow more beautiful with each new step. And somewhere in the quantum foam of space-time, reality itself smiled back.